I knew something was wrong the second I saw the laminated notice swinging from my backyard gate like some kind of government warning sign. Cream-colored cardstock, thick black lettering, the Crestwood Estates HOA logo stamped at the top, like they were serving a court summons instead of planning a wine and cheese party. And right there in the middle, bold as hell, it said, "The Spring Social Mixer will be hosted on the rear patio of Lot 14 this Saturday at 4 p.m. Lot 14. That was my house. My patio. My electricity, my furniture, my damn property taxes. No, would you mind? No, can we reserve the space? Not even a fake polite sentence pretending I had a choice. Just selected. Like they were assigning parking spaces or trimming hedges. I stood there staring at the paper while my neighbor across the fence, Denise, slowly lowered her sunglasses and gave me that look people give when they already know the HOA's about to do something stupid. "You saw it too, huh?" she asked, half whispering like we were discussing organized crime instead of suburban retirees with clipboards. I pulled the zip tie off the gate and walked inside, trying not to laugh, because honestly, when you get angry too fast you miss the comedy of it all. And trust me, there was comedy here. The funny part was that patio wasn't some shared community area. I built that thing myself over 2 summers. 12 feet of stamped concrete, custom cedar pergola stained espresso brown, warm string lights wrapped by hand during a freezing November weekend while my fingers went numb holding a staple gun. I paid for every inch of it. The HOA didn't contribute $1 unless you count the passive-aggressive violation letters about non-approved decorative lighting. So seeing them casually claim it like public property felt insane, but not surprising. That's the thing about certain HOA boards, especially the ones run by people who retired 20 years too early and suddenly discovered the emotional thrill of controlling mailbox colors. They stop seeing homeowners as neighbors and start seeing them as tenants who accidentally think they have rights. And the king of that little empire was a guy named Russell Hargrove. Former commercial property supervisor, always wore white polo shirts tucked into khakis like he was born inside a country club dress code. Russell loved rules the way little kids love dinosaurs. The problem was, he only liked rules when they benefited him. About 6 months earlier, he'd already tried to fine me because my pergola stain was apparently too dark for community harmony. Community harmony. I swear these people write violations like rejected Bond villains. I appealed it, won immediately, and ever since then Russell had this weird smile every time we crossed paths, the kind where someone acts polite while mentally sharpening a knife. So when I saw that notice hanging on my gate, I knew this wasn't random. This was territorial, personal. A little suburban power move disguised as a social event. That night I sat at my kitchen table with a bourbon and the full HOA governing documents spread out under a hanging light fixture like I was preparing for trial. 49 pages of CC and AMP, RS, bylaws, amendments, architectural clauses, all written in that smug legal language designed to make ordinary people give up halfway through paragraph 2. But buried deep in section 8, subsection D, there it was. Privately funded exterior improvements constructed within deeded lot boundaries may not be utilized for association activities without written homeowner authorization. I read it 3 times just to enjoy it properly. Then I checked the county property map online. The patio sat fully inside my lot line. Not shared space. Not easement territory. Mine. Completely mine. And that's when this whole thing stopped being annoying and started becoming entertaining. Because once I realized Russell and the HOA had already sent invitations, ordered catering, and started collecting event fees for a party scheduled on property they legally couldn't use, I suddenly understood something beautiful. They hadn't trapped me. They'd trapped themselves. And I'll be honest with you. The moment I saw that opening, I did what any exhausted homeowner pushed too far by a power-hungry HOA would eventually do. I opened my laptop, and I rented my patio out to somebody else for the exact same afternoon. Now let me pause the story for a second, because this is where a lot of HOAs get themselves into trouble without even realizing it. People hear HOA and assume those boards can do whatever they want. They really can't. According to standard procedure, an HOA only controls what's specifically granted inside the governing documents, meaning if the CC and AMP, RS don't explicitly give them authority over a privately deeded structure, they're already standing on thin ice. And that's exactly what Russell was counting on, not legality, but intimidation. See, Most homeowners never read the documents because they're boring as drywall and twice as painful. Boards know that. They rely on people feeling outnumbered, confused, or too tired to argue. From a legal perspective, using privately funded property for a ticketed HOA event without written consent creates a massive liability problem. Insurance exposure, property damage issues, even potential commercial use disputes depending on the state. But honestly, the legal side wasn't even the most interesting part to me. The real story was psychological. This is a psychological trap a lot of small power structures fall into. Once people get used to compliance, they stop asking permission and start assuming ownership. Russell genuinely believed nobody would challenge him because nobody usually did. The lesson here is, the fastest way to break an entitled system is forcing it to collide with its own paperwork. By Friday morning, my patio was officially booked. Not by the HOA, by a local wellness studio called Emberflow Yoga. 4-hour rental, paid in full, non-refundable deposit already sitting in my account before I'd even finished my second cup of coffee. And the second that payment cleared, I printed every receipt, every confirmation email, every screenshot of the booking agreement like I was building evidence for a murder trial. Because here's the thing. Once people like Russell realize you're not bluffing, they stop acting annoyed and start acting desperate. Around noon, my phone buzzed with the first voicemail. "Ethan, this is Russell Hargrove with the Crestwood Estates Board. We need to discuss a misunderstanding regarding Saturday's community mixer." Misunderstanding. That word almost made me choke laughing. 20 minutes later, another voicemail came in, less polished this time. "You need to call me back immediately before this situation escalates unnecessarily." And there it was, the shift. Not neighbor to neighbor anymore. Authority to subject. He still thought pressure would work because pressure had probably worked his entire life. I ignored both calls. Instead, I mailed a certified letter directly to the HOA management office. Calm tone, professional wording, copies of the deed map attached, highlighted sections from the CC and AMP, RS included for convenience because I'm generous like that. I informed them my patio had been rented to a third party during the exact hours of the planned mixer, and that any unauthorized entry onto the property could constitute trespassing and interference with a contracted event. I even added a nice little sentence thanking them for respecting private property boundaries moving forward. Petty? Maybe. But if someone's going to treat your backyard like a public park, a little pettiness becomes community service. Saturday morning rolled around quiet and sunny. One of those suburban spring mornings where everything looks suspiciously peaceful. Birds chirping, sprinklers ticking, somebody 3 houses over pressure washing a driveway like they were preparing for a military inspection. Around 9 a.m. the yoga instructor arrived. Her name was Sierra, late 30s, calm voice, drove a silver Subaru covered in mountain stickers. She stepped into the backyard, took one look at the pergola and string lights and said, "Okay, this space is gorgeous." I told her she might witness a minor suburban uprising before noon. She laughed like she thought I was joking. I helped her carry and rolled yoga mats, battery candles, little baskets of eucalyptus towels, and one of those essential oil diffusers that makes every room smell like expensive self-improvement. By 11 o'clock, the patio looked less like a backyard and more like a wellness retreat for overworked tech executives trying to reconnect with their breathing patterns. And right around then, Russell arrived. I heard him before I saw him. Car door slam. Fast footsteps. The unmistakable sound of somebody already angry rehearsing arguments in their head while walking up a driveway. I opened the front door, and there he stood in a tucked-in pale blue polo, sunglasses pushed onto his forehead, carrying a folding banquet table under one arm and a plastic tray of printed name tags under the other. Behind him were 2 teenage volunteers dragging coolers full of bottled water and sandwich trays. Russell looked at me like I'd personally insulted democracy. "What exactly is going on here?" he snapped. Not hello, not good morning. Straight to outrage. I leaned casually against the doorway and handed him a manila envelope. "That," I said, "is an invoice." He stared at me. "An invoice?" "Yep. Unauthorized commercial usage of privately deeded property. For hours at market rate, plus disruption fees." His jaw tightened while he opened the envelope. I'd formatted it beautifully too. Company-style letterhead. Itemized charges. Professional font. Total amount due, $480. Underneath that, attached with a paperclip, was a formal consent request application for any future HOA use of my property. The teenage volunteers behind him looked like they wanted to disappear into another dimension. Russell's face started turning a dangerous shade of pink. "You can't do this," he said quietly. And honestly, that sentence right there told me everything. Not, "We misunderstood." Not, "Let's work this out." Just, "You can't challenge me." That was the real issue. I smiled. "Actually, according to your own bylaws, I absolutely can." He took one step forward like he was preparing for a courtroom drama scene. "This is a community function. On private property," I replied immediately. "Property you charged residents to access, by the way." That hit him hard, because he knew I knew about the ticket sales. And once somebody realizes you understand the money side of a situation, the whole power dynamic changes. His eyes flicked toward the backyard gate behind me. That's when he finally noticed the soft instrumental music floating through the air. He leaned sideways slightly and saw the yoga class. 23 lavender-colored mats laid out in perfect rows across my concrete patio. Battery lanterns hanging beneath the pergola beams. A diffuser releasing thin curls of lavender mist into the sunlight. Half a dozen women quietly stretching near the garden beds, while Sierra spoke softly about mindfulness and grounding energy. It was glorious. Cinematic levels of glorious. Russell just stood there frozen, clutching those stupid name tags while watching his HOA cocktail mixer evaporate into a meditation retreat. One of the volunteers behind him whispered, "Are those yoga people?" I almost lost it right there. Russell turned back toward me with that expression people get when reality refuses to cooperate with their ego. "You intentionally sabotaged this event." "No," I said calmly. "I honored a legally binding rental agreement on my property." And that's the moment he realized he had no moves left. Because yelling wouldn't help him. Threats wouldn't help him. The documents were against him. The property lines were against him. Even optics were against him. Think about it. Middle-aged HOA president screaming at a homeowner while a peaceful yoga class breathes calmly in the background? That's not exactly a winning public relations strategy. Denise chose that exact moment to appear outside with her coffee mug because of course she did. Some neighbors are drawn to drama like raccoons to unsecured trash cans. "Morning, Russell," she called cheerfully. "Love what they've done with the patio." He ignored her completely. Then came my favorite part. One by one, residents started arriving for the mixer. Couples in golf shirts. Retirees carrying casserole dishes. Somebody brought sangria in a glass dispenser. Every single person stopped dead when they saw the yoga session happening instead of the social event. And because suburban neighborhoods spread gossip faster than fiber optic internet, the whispers started immediately. "Wait, this is his patio? The board didn't ask permission? They sold tickets already?" You could literally watch public opinion turning in real time. Russell tried salvaging control. Everyone remained calm. He announced loudly, which is always something people say right before things are absolutely not calm. "There appears to be a temporary scheduling conflict." Temporary scheduling conflict. God bless corporate language. Meanwhile, Sierra's class had moved into guided breathing exercises, so there were now 23 people inhaling deeply in synchronized silence, while HOA members awkwardly held pasta salad containers 10 feet away. Honestly, if somebody filmed the scene and submitted it to a film festival called Suburban Psychological Warfare, it probably would have won something. Russell finally pulled me aside near the driveway, lowering his voice into that fake, controlled tone angry people use when they're 2 seconds away from exploding. "You're embarrassing the association." "No," I replied. The association embarrassed itself. Silence. Just total silence after that. Because deep down he knew it was true. This whole thing happened because nobody on that board considered homeowners actual equals. They saw us as manageable obstacles attached to property values. And the second somebody pushed back using their own rules, the illusion cracked. Russell looked exhausted suddenly, older somehow. "What do you want?" he muttered. That question mattered. Because people like him always assume conflict is transactional. That everybody has a price. But honestly, by that point it wasn't even about money anymore. It was about boundaries. I want the board to stop pretending private property becomes community property whenever it's convenient, I said. And I want written acknowledgement that this never should have happened. He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded once. Small. Defeated. By 2 p.m. the HOA officially canceled the mixer through a neighborhood email blaming Unexpected venue complications. Unexpected venue complications might be the most elegant phrase ever invented for, we got legally outmaneuvered in front of 30 witnesses. The yoga class ended around 3:30 with herbal tea and soft acoustic music under the pergola lights. Sierra thanked me again before leaving and said, "You know, this space has really peaceful energy." If only she knew. The following Tuesday, an envelope arrived in my mailbox from the HOA management office. Inside was a check for the full invoice amount and a formal written request asking permission to reserve my patio for next year's spring event. Permission. Amazing how quickly that word reappears once consequences enter the conversation. And the best part? Russell signed the request personally. I still keep it in a drawer somewhere. Not because of the money. Honestly, the money barely mattered. I kept it because sometimes the only way to remind people where the line is to make them trip over it publicly. Looking back now, the weirdest part of this whole thing isn't that the HOA tried to use my patio without asking. It's how normal everyone acted about it at first. That's the part people outside these neighborhoods don't always understand. Tiny abuses of authority become invisible when they happen slowly enough. One board ignores a boundary, residents stay quiet because they don't want drama, then eventually everybody starts treating overreach like it's just part of community living. And honestly, that's how people like Russell end up convincing themselves they own pieces of your life they were never supposed to touch in the first place. From a legal perspective, none of this was complicated. The documents were crystal clear. But social pressure is powerful, especially in HOA neighborhoods where everyone's afraid of becoming that difficult homeowner. Most people would have sighed, moved the patio furniture around, maybe attended the mixer with fake smiles, then complained privately afterward. And trust me, the board was counting on exactly that. This is a psychological trap communities fall into all the time. People confuse avoiding conflict with maintaining peace. Those are not the same thing. Real peace requires boundaries. Otherwise, the loudest personalities slowly redraw the rules until nobody remembers where the original line was. The lesson here is entitlement survives on assumption. The second somebody calmly, legally, publicly says, actually, no, the entire dynamic changes. And I think that's why this story spread around the neighborhood so fast afterward. It wasn't really about a patio. It was about watching someone challenge a system people secretly felt intimidated by for years. Funny enough, after all this happened, the HOA board suddenly became a lot more careful with wording in their notices. Every request became extremely polite overnight. Amazing transformation. Apparently, respect was hiding inside them the whole time. It just needed a certified letter and 23 yoga mats to come out. But I'll throw this question to you guys because I genuinely want to know. If your HOA scheduled an event on your property without permission, would you fight it directly? Or would you just let it happen to avoid the neighborhood drama? Because personally, I think some lessons only stick when embarrassment is attached to them.